Did you know that cockatiels, these charming little companions, can also have a problem that many owners don't even imagine? Worms. That's right. But do we really need to worry about worms in these birds? Or is it all a myth that ends up generating unnecessary concern? In today's video, I'm going to show you when and why the use of worm medicine for cockatiels may be necessary, and how to know if your bird really needs this care. Does your cockatiel need medicine for worms? Is it really necessary or just an exaggeration? Stay with me because the answer may surprise you. In advance, I would like to ask you to leave your like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed. This really motivates me to continue bringing quality content to you. Today, I am going to address a somewhat controversial topic. I will try to draw a comparison between what science, human, and veterinary medicine understand about worms, whether in humans, pets such as dogs and cats, and finally in birds with a special focus on cockatiels. Before we get into the issue of medicines, it is important to understand what worms are, since many people do not have a deeper knowledge about the subject. Worms, my friends, are basically parasites that, most of the time, inhabit the intestines of animals. These parasites can have an elongated body, which can be flattened, the so-called flatworms, or even cylindrical, such as roundworms. It is worth mentioning that, in the kingdom of worms, many are free-living, living in the soil or water, without parasitizing the interior of other beings. However, some specific species settle in the internal organs of animals, and these are the ones we need to talk about. If we think about it in general, most of these worms actually live in the intestine, but they are not limited to this region. There are many that can invade other parts of the body, such as the liver, heart, and lungs, causing serious problems in both humans and animals. I bet you remember a time in your life when you needed to take a worm medicine, right? There are families who have the habit of deworming annually. And what does the WHO, the World Health Organization, say about this practice? After all, the WHO is the entity that regulates these issues of medicine and medicines at a global level. We became very familiar with the WHO's guidance during the pandemic, when new guidelines frequently emerged, such as wearing or not wearing masks, among other measures. However, there is a specific WHO protocol that recommends annual deworming in countries where worms are endemic, which means that in these places, this practice is considered necessary to maintain the health of the population. In places where basic sanitation is not efficient, such as in some parts of cities, the presence of worms can be a constant problem. If we compare, for example, with some cities in Europe or the United States, where basic sanitation is advanced, these worms have practically been eradicated. In these regions, the issue is no longer a concern. On the other hand, in rural areas or in places with an abundance of nature, the presence of worms is more common, making deworming an important measure. The use of remedies against worms becomes essential, especially for children, who often do not have proper hygiene habits. Although this problem can also affect adults, it tends to be more observed in children. It is worth noting that I did not mention in the video that worms hardly cause the death of an animal. Sometimes I hear people saying that the cockatiel died because of worms, but it is very likely that the cause is something else, such as a bacterial, viral, or even protozoan infection, which are usually more aggressive. The worms, in most cases, coexist with the animal's body in a kind of symbiosis, feeding on what the animal consumes. The symptoms of a worm infestation usually take years to manifest, and when they appear, they tend to be milder. While it is possible for a worm to cause serious complications, such as obstruction of the bowel, these cases are rare. However, if you raise birds like me and they have worms, you will notice that they will sing less, become more apathetic and sad, and even reproductive performance may drop. In the case of humans, deworming is important, and for pets such as dogs, it is also essential. Dogs are often affected by worms, and some worms are specific to dogs and cats, while others can be transmitted between these species and even to humans. The recommendation for deworming for dogs is usually done every 6 months, although some veterinarians indicate every 3 months, depending on the situation and the professional. This frequency can vary, but the important thing is to maintain this regular practice to ensure your pet's health. I've already talked about how deworming works for humans, dogs, and cats, but what about cockatiels? I have seen many veterinarians and breeders discussing whether or not it is necessary to deworm these birds. Some claim that it is not necessary, while others argue otherwise. But after all, what should we do? I will share with you what would be considered the gold standard in this case. The ideal would be to collect your cockatiel's feces and send it to a specialized laboratory that performs a parasitological analysis. This test will detect the presence of parasites in the stool. If the result is positive, then the use of the medicine is indicated. Otherwise, if there are no parasites, there is no need to administer the drug, avoiding possible adverse reactions. That would be the most careful approach. However, in practice, this procedure is often not strictly followed, not even for dogs and cats. Although an examination is sometimes requested, in most cases, veterinarians recommend regular deworming without the need for a prior test. I myself, when I take my cat to the vet, he usually asks if I have already done the deworming in the year, and if I say yes, we move on. The same happens with humans. In some cases, the doctor orders the exam, in others not. It depends a lot on the professional's assessment at that moment. Now let's be realistic. In many places, it is still difficult to find a clinic that offers parasitological analysis specific to birds. Perhaps for dogs it is more common, but for birds the situation is quite different. In addition, to request this exam, it is often necessary to go through a veterinarian, which can make the process bureaucratic, time-consuming, and expensive. If we consider the probability, the chance of a bird contracting worms is quite high, especially if it has contact with other birds such as sparrows or doves, which can interact with your cockatiel landing in the cage, for example. Unless you keep your bird in a completely sterilized and isolated environment, there is always a risk of worms, which can be introduced even through food or water. So, if you don't have easy access to a parasitological exam, which would be ideal, and consulting with a veterinarian is complicated, performing preventive deworming can be a valid option. Now, you may be wondering which medicine to use. Unfortunately, I won't go into specific detail in this video due to legal and regulatory issues. However, I can say that most cities have pet stores where you will find several options of dewormers for birds. Generally, when using a dewormer for birds, such as cockatiels, it is important to read the package insert carefully. There you will find the dosage, which indicates the correct amount of drops to be diluted per ml of water. The treatment is usually done for 2 or 3 days. If you are a breeder, it is recommended to avoid using the dewormer during the breeding season. Ideally, it should be administered during the bird's rest period. Many people believe that if the parents are free of worms, the puppies are unlikely to be affected. Therefore, by deworming the parents during the rest period, you help protect the puppies, preventing the transmission of parasites. If your bird has symptoms such as diarrhea, weight loss, dry chest, or respiratory problems, it is unlikely that worms are the cause. As I mentioned earlier, these parasites usually coexist with the animal's body without causing overt symptoms of illness. Other factors are more likely to be at play if these symptoms appear. If your cockatiel is experiencing any of these symptoms, such as diarrhea or weight loss, it is best to avoid using dewormers, as this can aggravate the problem. In these cases, the best thing to do is to see a veterinarian. If you can't get immediate access to one, look for someone who can guide you, as it could be something more serious such as a bacterial infection, chlamydia, or another health problem. And that's it, folks. I'll end here. I hope this video was helpful to you. If you need help or are facing any problems with your birds, leave it in the comments and we can make a video here to help you. And if you want to learn even more about cockatiels and poultry breeding, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos on cockatiel care. This is your opportunity. Come back often, okay? Now I'm saying goodbye to you. Thank you for watching this video and see you next time. I'll wait for you there. Bye-bye.